All right, guys, welcome. I forgot to resume the recording, so here we are. All right. So, in 2016, like I said, I launched Side Hustle Pro. Since then, it's amassed over 9 million downloads, multiple six figures in sponsorship. And while I was doing that, I was side hustling. So I worked full time at NPR, and I led the digital marketing for some of your favorite top podcasts like How I Built This, Code Switch, and so many others. And overall, I have over 15 years of experience as a marketer. So, like I said, I'm a full-time podcaster now. And in 2017, I was able to quit my job to podcast full-time. I started my podcast in 2016. I was able to quit my job at the end of 2017. And this is the post that I put up when I did that. You can scroll back to December 2017. I have the episode there still where I talk about how I built up to quitting my job, what went into the decision, plus how I was planning to move forward at the time. And then in 2022, fast forward, Side Hustle Pro was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. So very surreal moment for me to start this podcast in my living room. Now I do it in a closet in our apartment. And I am, you know, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2022. So a little bit on the personal side, and I share this because, again, this all relates to who I am, my outlook on life, and how I got into podcasting. So I was born in Jamaica, grew up in the Boogie Down Bronx. I have that, real street smart, like mindset, sensibility. I don't go out there and just do rash things. I need my money. But what I love about podcasting is it gave me freedom. It gave me flexibility. So when I had my job, I had very few vacation days, but podcasting allowed me to quit my job and go on the honeymoon of my dreams. And now I can work from anywhere. So my husband Moyo and I were both certified side hustlers. We're juggling parenting, careers, and our many entrepreneurial pursuits. So flexibility is huge for us. And I didn't even realize how important that was for me until I became a mom. I always dreamed of, I don't want to have to ask for PTO. I want to be able to call the shots a little bit more in my life, but I don't think I truly expected it to happen when it did. So I was just so blessed because when I had a job, I had little to no family leave, but podcasting allowed me to stay home with my son for the first 24 months of his life while getting paid to podcast. And now, like I said, this was just last week. We went to Jamaica for a little baby moon. I'm pregnant with my second. And podcasting allows me to work from anywhere while getting paid to podcast. All right. So on the road to podcasting, though, I've done a lot of things right, but I've done way more things wrong. And that's why I'm qualified to teach this tonight, because I want you guys to skip over all the mistakes that most podcasters make and get right to what's working. All right. So this was me in May 2015. I looked super happy, like I'm graduating, got my cap and gown. I'm in front of the University of Michigan Law School of Business. Go Blue. But inside, y'all, I'm actually freaking out. I'm freaking out because at this point, I'm rejected from the internship I had at Google. I thought I would get a full-time offer. I didn't. So I was graduating with no job. I was moving back to DC to live with my boyfriend with no income and barely any savings, if I'm being honest. But I'm never one to stay down too long. You can't keep a good woman down. So once I got back to DC, I started blogging again. I started soul searching. I said, all right, I got to figure this out. And at the time, I knew I wanted to tap into building my personal brand. Because at the end of the day, you'll always have that. You won't always have anyone else's job or title to put on your resume, but you'll always have your personal brand. I wasn't sure what that entailed. Like most people, I was not sure what that even means. So I did what a lot of you guys are doing tonight. I started following people who were further ahead of me on the path, so online branding coaches. And that inspired me to launch my blog. All right, stay with me here. This blog is very important. So I launched my blog. As you can see, it was tacky. It was ugly. It wasn't professionally designed. None of those things. I was making these designs myself. And I had content, but I didn't have any purpose. I didn't really know where it was going. All right, but the important thing was that I got started. The important thing was that I got started, okay? Key phrase here. So I learned you have to be willing to take the first step, even when you don't know where it will lead. So I continued to blog. That was 2015 going through 2016. And by early 2016, I started realizing the common thread. I personally love sharing the stories of Black women side hustlers and entrepreneurs. I was inspired by that path. I wanted to take that path. I loved hearing those stories. So that's when the idea for my podcast was born. So I turned my blog into a podcast. I stopped blogging and I went full force in podcasting. A year before launching Side Hustle Pro, I didn't even know what a podcast was, y'all. Someone had to tell me about the read and I started listening. And that's when I learned about it. And then here I was a year later, launched my podcast. And in the first 7 days after launching Side Hustle Pro, boom, Side Hustle Pro landed in the top charts. Here I am on the left, top 10 in marketing, on the right, number 37 in business. And if you really pay attention, I'm like 2 spaces above Amy Porterfield, who is the person that I looked to when I first started learning about online branding. So full circle moment, right? And once I launched, I went hard on promotion. So I got these t-shirts printed up. I started a little shop. I went all over. Every conference you saw me at, I was in this t-shirt. And as I started my little world tour with Side Hustle Pro, I realized that I was onto something. And if I took this seriously, I could quit my job. Like very early in this journey, that is the realization I made. So, but in order to quit your job, you have to make money, right? You have to replace your income. So I started studying how to make money podcasting from early. So I invested in courses to learn how to pitch sponsors. I didn't know anything about that world. At the time, I thought that was like the main way to make money, but I've since learned there's other ways. So at that time, I invested $1,197 in a 2-day event sponsorship intensive. And I bold events because it wasn't even podcast specific, but I was just eager and thirsty and hungry to learn anything at all about sponsorship and making money. So I took that and I applied it to podcasting. And then 6 months after launching the podcast, I started cold pitching sponsors, meaning I didn't know anyone. I started just like emailing admin at info at hi at email accounts from their website. And through that process, I actually earned my first $4,000 podcast sponsorship contracts. Yes, that's how it all began. So since then, Side Hustle Pro has been featured in New and Noteworthy on Apple. I've been featured in tons of different categories. Here's the show featured in the Bold Women section. It's been featured on Today's Show, Oprah Magazine, Forbes, and I even hosted my own live show with another person that I looked to when I first was looking at online branding, Maya Elias. So another full circle moment, and this was in 2019. And now we're here to talk about how I went from graduating with no job, no money, to the Podcast Hall of Fame, to making money podcasting, being a full-time podcaster. So get ready to learn my top 3 tips to go from hobby to hustle with your podcast, all right? Get your notes out, your pen, your paper, your screenshot, whatever. And thank y'all on the congratulations. Yeah, I'm really excited. So let's get into it. First, I'll go over the 3 tips and then I'll break them down. Y'all ready? Put a ready in the chat if you're ready. So tip number 1, I'm going to go over the 3 things you should stop doing with your podcast and what to do instead, because these 3 things are going to hinder your money-making ability. Tip number 2, I'm going to talk about an easy way to get listeners so that they stay connected and your show grows faster. This is a tried and proven method I've been using since 2015 for my blog, even before I had a podcast. And it is tried and true, and it really helps to jumpstart that audience. And then tip 3, I'll go over my favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away, you guys. So I'll teach you how to set yourself up to get there. All right, so now let me break it on down. All right, I see the readies in the chat. Cool. All right, let me break it on down now. So Tip number one, the 3 things you should stop doing with your podcast and what to do instead. So number one, stop doing this. Keeping your podcast super broad so you don't put yourself in a box. That sound familiar? Number two, stop doing this. Starting a general conversation podcast with the homies and making your podcast title vague or a play on words. Does that sound familiar? Who's doing that? Let me know in the chat. Say guilty as charged. And number three, stop doing this. Launching in-person video podcasts before you even master audio podcasting. All right. Let me tell you, here's what happens when you do these things. You make it hard for people to find your show when searching for the topics you're discussing on the show. Number two is you make it hard for people to know what your show is even about, and that is for them. And then finally, you waste a lot of money on overhead and startup costs before you start making any money from your show. So that's the downside of doing those things. So here's what you should do instead to go from hobby to hustle with your podcast. First of all, define your audience. Get clear on who your show is for. Define your niche. Get clear on what your show is about and your show's angle. And then finally, number three, make it easy for people to find you. So that means you're going to use clear and targeted language for your show title, your description, and your episode titles. So let's get into some examples of this, right? So when I started my blog, it was called Kayla K Speaks. I was doing everything I just told y'all not to do. Again, I made the mistakes, so y'all don't have to, all right? So it was called Kayla K Speaks. It was a play on my name, Nikayla. I thought it was cute and catchy. It was not. People didn't know what it meant. People didn't know how to say it. People were mispronouncing it. And it was very random. I was writing about every and everything that caught my attention that week. And I didn't start it with anyone in mind. So that's no way to build an audience. No one knew it was for them or what it was about. So that was not very successful. However, once I got laser focused on who my show was for and what my angle was, which was this side hustle angle, specifically Black women entrepreneurs who scaled from side hustlers to full-time entrepreneurs. Once I got really specific in that way, I saw more success, way more success. And now please understand that you do not have to niche down by any particular demographic criteria, but you do have to niche down based on who your audience is and what you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be about race, doesn't have to be about gender, doesn't have to be about occupation, any of those things, whatever it is that you want to niche down based on. So here's another example. This is Erica M. McAfee. She is the host of the Sisters in Laws podcast. And originally, even though her podcast is about pregnancy, grief, and infant loss, her show was just called the Erica M. McAfee podcast. This is a common mistake podcasters make because they think, oh, I want to be a personal brand. I want to brand myself, so I should name my show after myself. Wrong. Actually, you need to name your show after what people are searching for. So it doesn't have to be literal, right? It can draw them in. Sisters in Loss is a cue to her audience, Black women who've gone through loss, that, hey, this might be for me. But then when they read the description and they read the episode titles, they're given even more clarity to know, oh, this is for me. And then you can even see some subtle African print behind the yellow of her podcast logo to signal that even more. So these are the ways that you go from broad and general to really clear and really defined. Important, guys, this is really important. Make it easy for people to find you. If people are searching for whatever your show is about, you should be coming up for those things. So if people are searching for Black Women Side Hustle podcast, Black Women Business podcast, Black Women Entrepreneurship podcast, Side Hustle Pro will come up. Similarly, if people are searching for pregnancy loss podcast, Erica's Sisters in Laws podcast will pop up. So it starts with carefully choosing your podcast name, carefully writing out your podcast description to include those terms that people are searching for. And then finally, carefully writing those episode titles. So Even your favorite conversational podcasts niche down and they're known for their angle. A lot of people think, oh, but so-and-so does it, so-and-so does it. If you really look at what people are doing and study what people are doing, they are niching down. And how they're doing that is, number one, through all of the things that you might think are random that they're talking about, there's actually an overarching thread that unites the various topics they may touch on. For example, adulting as a Black woman. That's the theme of the Getting Grown podcast. These shows also will have a format with segments. So the format anchors the show in reliability and in structure and in helping it have a certain flow. Finally, not finally, but number three, they consistently speak about certain subjects. So when their audience tunes in, they know that they're going to hear them touch on X, Y, and Z. For example, pop culture news, business, entertainment, dating, and relationships within those segments. And then as a result of all of this, their audience knows exactly what to expect when they tune in. So don't get fooled thinking that, you can just do general podcasts and it'll be successful. You, the average person, you have to do way more work than that. So that's tip number one. Let's recap. To stand out as a podcaster, you have to establish your angle. So what I mean by that is to go from hobby to hustle with your podcast, you need to be standing out with your show. So that means you need to get clear on what your show is about, who it's for. Don't be afraid to pick a niche, AKA your show's angle, and make it easy for people to find you and know what your show is about. Now, here's what you should do instead to go from hobby to hustle, all right? Again, define your audience, define your niche, make it easy for people to find you. All right, tip number two. Now we're going to get into an easy way to get listeners so that they stay connected and your show grows faster. All righty. So this one, definitely going to want to take notes because this is an exact strategy that I teach inside of Podcast Moguls. But I'm sharing this here for free, a little sneak peek with y'all tonight. So a lot of people think that you need like all these followers on Instagram to promote anything. And they also think that you need like this Instagram feed that's perfectly color coordinated with filtered photos and presets and things that people buy in the perfect sequence. And here's what happens when you think these things. You don't even try to create content, or you miss out on opportunities to share with your audience and then make money. And then your audience and your opportunities to make money remain stagnant. So here's what you should do instead to go from hobby to hustle with your podcast. Simply focus on getting in front of the right followers. So what do I mean by the right followers? I mean the people who will be interested in your podcast. Those are the people that will click the link in your bio and grow your podcast downloads. So I saw a question briefly come in about how important is marketing and promoting your podcast. It is the most important. You have to promote your podcast. If you don't promote it, then no one knows it's out there. All right. So here's a case study of how to build your podcast audience by targeting the right followers on Instagram. So I want you to meet Podcast Moguls alum, Ashley of the Stacks in the City podcast. Ashley used what we call the Side Hustle Pro OMG formula to gain her first 1,000 downloads. Again, I teach this inside of Podcast Moguls. So OMG basically has 3 steps: the O, the M, and the G. The O is obsessively auditing. Another word for just studying. You have to take some time to study what's working in your niche, what people are posting about, what's resonating with your audience, and in what format. Is it infographics? Is it quote retweets, quote reposts? Is it reels? Is it picture photos with a long story caption? Really study what information is resonating and how the information is packaged. So you're going to obsessively audit people who are a little further ahead of you and what really works for this audience. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to copy, because no matter what, how you talk and how you put your spin on things is going to be you. It's going to be something that no one else can replicate. All right. But you're going to get a sense of what content types you should focus on creating. So, and remember to put your questions in the Q&A, guys. I'm only going to go from the Q&A. So the step 2 of the OMG is the M, make friends. So in addition to studying what's working for your audience, the content types, so that you can later test them, you are going to actively and proactively introduce yourself to your audience. That means, yes, follow. This is not follow for follow. This is like going to a networking event, a virtual event, and introducing yourself to someone, because they're going to come back to your page and say, hey, who is this that just followed me? Especially as you engage with their page. So don't just follow, but actively engage, like, and interact with their posts so they know that you're not just a random bot. Now don't go DMing them like, oh, listen to my podcast. None of that stuff. Be a human, an actual human, okay? And here's what's possible with making friends, in case y'all don't believe me. So I started OMG, again, very early in the process when I was first growing my blog and then growing the podcast. And as I did this, people, as you can see here, actually wrote me back like, oh my God, listening in now. I don't know how you found me on IG, but thank God you did. So people are thanking me because they didn't know about my show, because Instagram's so huge, everyone's in their bubble, but now they come back and they see and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know about this show. This is exactly what I need. I too want to grow my side hustle. And this is another one. Someone was actually already a listener, and this person wrote, your friend request really brightened my day. I love your podcast. So this is a real human touch element that Instagram allows that is really, really impactful. And then step 3 in OMG is to go over that data. So as you are on Instagram for your podcast, you want to create a business profile, and that will allow you to see your insights each and every week, which you should go over each and every week to understand what's resonating with your followers, which content had the most impressions, had the most interactions, what time your followers are most active and engaged, and so forth and so forth. And you're going to use this data to then inform the content that you create the next week. So here's what happened as a result of Ashley doing the OMG formula. So Ashley went from having 758 to 1,216 Instagram followers in less than 8 weeks in Podcast Moguls. And in case you don't see the impacts of that, Stacks in the City, her show, went from 300 to 1,400 monthly downloads in less than 8 weeks inside of Podcast Moguls. So that is a 4x jump, you guys. So I don't care where you are in the process right now. Would you like that for your show? A 4x jump in downloads? I bet you would. I'm seeing the yes. Yes, most definitely. Okay, good. And that's why I teach this. So it's not just about the followers though, right? Why is getting in front of the right followers so important? Because as your followers grow, so do your downloads, and so does your audience. And as your audience grows, that is what opens up your money-making opportunities. So for Ashley, she landed in the top business charts on Apple Podcasts. You'll see Stacks in the City is number 179 on this day. And there are like hundreds of thousands of business podcasts. Only 200 make the top list. So for you to jump through 200,000, 300,000 business podcasts to be in the top 200 is a huge and impressive feat. And that was accomplished by her growing her audience and having more people listen. So the great thing about podcasting is you can use it to do so many things. Like there are people who they have taken a pause from podcasting, but they're still making money because of the podcast platform. And Stacks in the City is one of them. So she has expanded her personal brand and income generating opportunities beyond podcasting. So what she's done is she now does different workshops on things that she's an expert in, like house hunting, and charges for that. So as your downloads grow, so do your money-making opportunities. Check-in time. Let me know if this is helpful for you guys. Give me a yes in the chat if it is. All right, all right. I'm so glad this is helpful for you guys. I'm gonna take a sip of water while I do that because I've just been yapping. I see the heck yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love to see this. I love to know that this is helpful for you guys because this is why I do this. So now let's go ahead and get into tip number 3. Well, let's recap real quickly. So again, to start building a bigger audience, which will help you go from hobby to hustle, you need to target the right followers. So that means obsessively auditing, making new friends, and going over the data. And tip number 3, my favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away. Let's get into this, you guys. All right. So how to make money podcasting. This all really starts with getting to know your listeners. If you don't know who listens to your show, you can't create a product for them. And if you don't know who listens to your show, you can't pitch sponsors because they want to know who they're talking to. So people often ask me, what size, how many downloads do I need to get sponsors? It's more than downloads. You need to know who your audience is, their demographics, age range, income range, race, gender, where they live, location, their interests. These are all things that you need to drill down on. So you can do this in many ways. Inside of Podcast Moguls, we do what's called the perfect listener exercise. I give you some homework to really drill down who your perfect listener is. And you want to listen to people. You want to find out what are their challenges, what are their needs, what products do they talk about, what conferences do they attend, what services do they use, where do they get their news, what questions do they have, all of that. You really want to understand who is listening and why your show resonates with them. So that is the baseline foundation before we get into, how to make money. And then here's a little pre-work as well before we talk about the different options for making money. So pre-work means that you need to grow your email list. In order to make money podcasting, your email list is going to be very, very important. When you start out with a podcast, you start growing your show using OMG and other methods that I teach, right? You start growing that audience. But we all know we don't own our social media audience, right? We can't, if the platform goes down, if for some reason we get kicked off, we can't talk to those people ever again. So your first order of business is trying to get those people off of social media and onto your email list. So you do that by creating what's called a lead magnet, aka a magnet for your lead who's coming onto your email list, or you can just call them freebies. So these are free resources that you can create. You talk about during your episodes. Hey, go over to sidehustlepro.co/start here to get your ultimate guide to getting your side hustle up and running. And then as people download it, they're added to your email list. Like, this is the trade-off, right? You get something free, now you're on my email list. So that's how you start growing your email list. When I was first starting out, one of the biggest jumps I had with my email list was I did a social media challenge. I did like a 7-day live social media kind of like a mini master the gram challenge on Facebook. So that's one way, like, people had to sign up for it, and that really helped me to jumpstart my list. So just brainstorm different things you want to do with your audience based on what your show is about, what you do, and that's how you start this and do this pre-work. All right, so now, now you got your email list going, right? And again, it doesn't have to be a huge list. Like, aim for your first 100 first, right? And then go from there. So just keep on growing as your show grows, but just get started. So now that you've gotten started, here are some of the options that you have. Option 1 is to create a paid product. You can start with things like an ebook or a course, and then again, you can promote it on your show. You can promote it within your freebies. You can promote it to your email list. That's why it's so important to have an email list. All of you guys, you heard from me via email throughout this week, right? So this is one of the core options that I utilize these days. I love creating my own intellectual property courses, guides, because I just get so many questions all the time about things that I have done, my social media knowledge, my podcasting knowledge, all of those things. And I decided to take them out of my brain, take them out of the DMs with, one person at a time, and make it available for everyone to have. So if you go onto the sidehustlepro.co site, you'll see you can join Podcast Moguls. You can learn to master the gram in the Master the Gram program. So these are two of the signature courses that I teach. So that's one of your first options when you are making money as a podcaster. And this is not tied to any download number. This is truly about connecting and understanding your audience and having them come over to your email list so you can message them with this offering. A second option, and one that a lot of people love and start with, is merchandise, creating merch for your show. And you guys saw earlier in the slides how I created my t-shirts when I launched my show and I went on the road. So that was definitely one of the first areas that I explored, developing products that your listeners love and need. One of the keys here is products that your listeners love, not self-serving products, right? Products that people really ask for. So here's an example for the Read podcast. They have a logo that's so beloved, like people love wearing their little talking heads. And so that's something that people have requested, and they literally created this site for their audience after much requests. And then they also have some of their key slogans and phrases that people love and hear on the show all the time. All righty. So, and here's from my own website, the Side Hustle Pro products. So I have my signature t-shirt, sweatshirt, and sweatpants, and mug are some of the products that I love and I created for the listeners. So that's option two, you can develop products, you can develop merchandise. Journals are another one that people like to create, but with this and with all of your potential revenue streams, you have to think about the margins, AKA what you're profiting after you spend money on the actual cost of the products and, you ship it and all this other stuff. Like, what are you actually making? The third option for making money in podcasting is pitching brands that your listeners will love and need. So this again goes back to knowing your listeners. You will see the most success with the sponsorship route when it's a win-win. Your listeners needed this and the sponsors get a good result. So if you get a sponsor and they don't see a great result, they probably won't re-up. So it's, in your best interest to truly understand what your listeners need. So these are some of the three of the sponsors that I have worked with throughout the years, and things like Skillshare, which is a platform where people go to learn and do short courses and to buck up on their skills, it makes a lot of sense for a Side Hustle Pro audience. In addition, FreshBooks, which is cloud accounting for freelancers and side hustlers, makes perfect sense, right? And then also Squarespace, a website builder for people who are doing their own websites. So because I know who my audience is and I know what they need right now in their business, these partnerships made a lot of sense and it was a win-win for all. And then another option, option 4, is you can create a paid subscription for your podcast. This has become increasingly popular in the last few years, and you can do that with sites. You can do it through Apple. You can do it through third-party sites like Patreon. This is an example from the Friend Zone's Patreon account. And if you're going to create a paid subscription for your podcast, you don't have to reinvent the wheel or to, do anything crazy. Like, do some market research, see what people are offering, and start there. Start with, okay, let me do some exclusive content just for my subscribers. Let me not include any ads. Let me, do some exclusive things in this area and that area. And then if you want to have different tiers, so you can see here in their premium tier, they actually do a live stream Q&A with just subscribers. So you can go and review on Patreon, which I love about that. You can go and review people's different plans, what they're offering, to give you some ideas. And if you're not there yet, because either you haven't launched, or let's say, you don't yet have the bandwidth to do that, at least you can start making plans. All right, here's what I want to be able to do by this date so that I can launch a subscription. All right. So all of those are options. All of those are options. It's up to you which option you want to choose. And obviously, in order to do any one of those, all of them are hard. There's no easy free lunch in this podcasting world. Like, no matter what, you're gonna have to work hard and focus. And I recommend starting with one at a time. Because your merch is not gonna take off overnight. The sponsorship route involves a lot of knocking on people's doors, and then after that, you do it, and it takes a while to get paid and to get ramped up. So all of these take time. So what you can focus on and the steps you need to get there is, number one, launching your show if you haven't already. And if you have launched your show, keep working on growing your audience. Again, you can use OMG and the additional marketing methods that I teach inside of Podcast Moguls. And as you grow your audience, do the pre-work before you start a revenue stream of building your email list. Don't just build the audience on social media without building the email list as well. And then after that, decide on your revenue path. Like I said, try out one thing at a time. So if you're creating a service, start small and test it to make sure that it's something your listeners really need. When I created my Master the Gram challenge, that was a test to find out, all right, would people be interested in learning more about how I've been able to, grow my social media following and be so successful using social media? All right, let me do this challenge. That was a test. It was free. It didn't cost anybody anything. Then I tested, all right, what if I have a paid component? Now what would that look like? Will this be helpful? What's the feedback that I got from this? And so forth. If you're creating a product, start with 1 to 2 products at a time, specifically with merchandise. So if you're starting with merch, create like a t-shirt first, then maybe you might add in a second product, but don't have too much inventory or even if it's not inventory, even if you're drop shipping, like, you don't want to overwhelm people with too many choices. Let them really focus on your best product, your best option, and go from there. And if you're creating a paid subscription, again, research the market to decide what to include and what fellow podcasters charge for subscription tiers. I know that, we all want to come in and charge premium prices, but there's such a thing as what the market will bear. So pay attention, because if podcasters who are further ahead of you and have bigger audiences are only charging a certain amount, it's going to be very hard for you to come in and disrupt that with like $25 tier as a smaller podcaster. So be realistic, study the market, understand what it can bear. And then finally, if you're pitching sponsors, develop a media kit and start cold pitching. So I provide examples and actually my exact emails that I started pitching with, my exact media kit. And by the way, my media kit was not cute. It was another DIY Nikayla production, but it got me money though. So I share all of that inside of Podcast Moguls, plus a pricing calculator for you to calculate how much you can charge and what would make sense for your podcast. So all of that is inside of Podcast Moguls, all right? So let's do a quick rewind, you guys. We're about to get to Q&A soon. So let me just do a quick rewind and then we'll get into Q&A shortly. So from hobby to hustle, making money with your podcast. All right. Tip number 1, we went over the 3 things you should stop doing with your podcast to go from hobby to hustle and what to do instead. Tip number 2, we went over an easy way to get listeners so that they stay connected and your show grows faster. Tip number 3, we went over my favorite strategies to make money from your podcast that you can start using right away. So let me know how you guys feel. Let me know. I know some of you might be feeling overwhelmed right now, like you want to launch and grow your podcast, but you're trying to do everything at once. Or perhaps you feel stuck. You know, your podcast is just, it's out there. You were so excited to launch it, but it's not growing fast enough or getting enough downloads. And now, and you know that the lack of a proven blueprint is really what's holding you back. Or maybe you just feel determined. You came here tonight like, listen, I know the value of having this powerful platform like a regular podcast, and you're ready to do what it takes to grow. Well, I would be remiss to, go into Q&A without letting you guys know that you have options, okay? So option one is you can keep trying to DIY your podcast with tips gathered all over social media and YouTube. I always laugh when people are like, girl, you can get that for free. Why are you charging for that? Well, when you get something for free and you DIY and piecemeal it all together for free, you get the results of getting something for free, right? It takes you longer, you make the mistakes that you could have easily avoided and all that other good stuff. Option two, though, is to decide to make podcasting a priority, treat it like a job, and get my mentorship to know exactly where to start and what steps to take. So if you're down for option two, if you're interested, I want you to know that you're invited to join Podcast Moguls. The doors are open. I'm going to share a little bit with you guys about what the program entails. You guys are excited to try OMG. Cool. I'm excited for you. So I'll share a little bit about what Podcast Moguls entails, and I hope some of you will come on down, and then we'll get into Q&A. So first of all, Podcast Moguls is a mentoring program that teaches my proven effective marketing strategies to podcasters like yourself who want to have a hit podcast, grow a bigger following, and make money from your podcast. So Podcast Moguls is for you if you want to get access to mentorship and you want my podcast business advice. It's also for you if you want to learn simple and effective ways to promote your podcast and grow your audience. It's also for you if you want to learn how to pitch sponsors at any podcast size. And it's also for you if you want to continue to learn how to make money from your podcast at any podcast size. So Podcast Moguls has three components. It's an on-demand course itself, so you could join tonight, log in tonight, and you would have access to the 8-step podcast success curriculum, which includes video lessons, tutorials, templates, swipe files, and guides. And this is just an overview of the modules, in case you're wondering what's in it. So module 0 is the fundamentals module, where I go over equipment, setup, hosting, podcast publishing, etc. Module 1 is refining your topic and finding your perfect listener. Module 2 is positioning your podcast. Module 3 is launching your podcast. Module 4 is marketing your podcast, growing that Instagram reach. Module 5 is marketing your podcast, growing your email list. And module 6 is marketing your podcast, Facebook and Instagram advertising 101. Then in module 7, we get into monetization. So positioning your podcast for monetization. And module 8, creating that winning sponsorship pitch. Part 2 of the program is an actual private community. So inside of our private community, we share our wins, we share our challenges. This is an example from Felicia of the Trill MBA podcast. She shared when she made it to number 53 in iTunes. And she just said, you guys, what God does for one, he does for the others. Keep grinding. And hashtag thanks, Nikayla. And this is what I love to see, like the support inside of the community is everything, you guys. It truly is everything. So I'm so glad that we have that. And then also we meet monthly for video group coaching calls. So you receive personal guidance from me, deep dives on topics inside of those group coaching calls. So as you can see here, this is an actual screenshot from one of the group coaching calls. This is one where I invited my editor for my podcast, Chris, so that he could break down some even more granular editing topics and answer everyone's editing questions. And this session was so popular that I've kept the replay inside of the program. So if you join, you'll be able to see this right there inside of the program. And here's just a quick little comment from one of Podcast Mogul alums about how she enjoyed the program and community. Her name is Shirley. She's the host of the She's Got Drive podcast. She's in Chicago. Anybody from Chi-Town here? So Shirley said that she started implementing the marketing strategies, and within 3 months, she started with 25,000 downloads, and then within 3 months, she was at 46,000. She says her strategy absolutely works. So that's almost doubling your downloads within that time frame. So that's just incredible what people are able to do when you actually follow the blueprint that I provide. Someone says Chi-Town represent. And then also for the fellas, Fritz Charles of Coin Gamma podcast. So Fritz is another one who used podcasting as a platform, as a launching pad, and he is just taken off. So because of his podcast, which he started just because of his pure love of this topic of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all this other stuff. And then because of the podcast and people coming across it, he was able to speak at over 5 conferences. He was even flown in internationally to speak at conferences, all because of the podcast. So the opportunities that podcasting provides, it's truly like the new resume and the new portfolio for you. So inside of Podcast Moguls, you guys, just to give you an overview of what you're getting, we're getting monthly live coaching sessions, and this quote is priced at like if you were to get 4, but actually you can join our live coaching sessions for as long as the program exists. Like there are people who have joined in 2018 who still come back to live coaching sessions. I don't turn anyone away. So that in and of itself is a $4,000 value, just based on if you were to have a one-on-one coaching hour with me at $1,000. Then you have the annual private community access, which I know people who charge $2,364 a year on a monthly basis for people to be a part of their private community. And that's not lifetime, that's annual. It's, $2,364 annually for their Facebook community. Plus, you're also going to get all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kits. So you know that I spent $1,197 just on learning the sponsorship game. And that was for events. That wasn't even podcasting. Now my strategy is tried and true because I've applied it. I've done trial and error. I've cold pitched. I've got rejections and acceptances and major contracts from these pitch letters and media kits. So that by itself, I could sell for $1,197, but it's included within Podcast Moguls. Plus, you have my guest pitch templates, the exact emails that I use to reach out to guests and get them to be in the chair. People always ask me, how do you get these guests? Inside the program, you have my swipe files. You can literally cut and adapt it to your own show so that you can have more success with landing the guests you want. Bonus, when you invest, everyone gets Master the Gram. So this is an everyone bonus inside of the program. Everyone gets the full Master the Gram course, which teaches you how to build an engaged audience on Instagram. If you go over to my Teachable right now, Master the Gram by itself is $297. But, for spending your time here and joining Podcast Moguls tonight, this is included inside of the one-time fee. So you're getting monthly live coaching sessions. You're getting annual community access. You're getting all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kits. You're getting guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram. Plus, when you invest, you also get the Goal Getter Action Plan. So this is my productivity blueprint that teaches you my system for getting things done, all right? And this is how I was able to side hustle and build up this successful podcast and quit my job using my Goal Getter system. So I want y'all to succeed as well. So I'm including it in the program. So again, you're getting monthly live coaching sessions, annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kits, my guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan. And In case you didn't whip out your calculator to tally that up, that's actually a full value of $8,553. Obviously not going to charge you that. A special promotional price tonight for Podcast Moguls. You can join today and actually get 65% off the full price. So you can pay tonight $997 when it's regularly priced at $3,000. So that's a $2,000 savings. And you do have two options. Option one is you pay in full, and option two is 4 monthly payments of $297. And Joanne, I saw that you dropped this one in the chat. So thank you so much, you guys. Thank you so much, Joanna, on my team for dropping that. It's sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls, all one word. Podcast Moguls, all one word. All right. So doors are now open for Podcast Moguls. I'm going to stop sharing for a bit just to make sure you guys have that correct link. And then we will go ahead and resume in a second. So remember to put all your questions in the chat, because I'm gonna roll through every single one of them. All righty. So let me see if I can pin this. Okay, I can't pin this, but I just put this in there for you guys, all right? So let me share my screen one last time because I want to go over a few things with you guys. So there are a couple more things that I want to just make sure you understand about Podcast Moguls. So first, I know that anytime you have to make a decision about spending your money, like, it's a very personal decision, and I respect that completely. Like, I remember when I paid for that sponsorship course, like, I needed to really sit down and ask myself, well, okay, what am I hoping to gain from this? And would it be worth it if? I always do the would it be worth it if equation. So for you, would it be worth it to you if Podcast Moguls helped you quit your job? Would being able to live life on your own terms be worth it to you? Yes. Then I highly recommend joining, you can come over right now to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. And even if you don't want to quit your job, would being able to have extra income on the side, would that make it worth it to you? So ask yourself those kind of questions. So that's what happened to Lori of the Read, Write, and Create podcast. She shared this testimonial with me via email, and it's long, but I just have to read it because her story is just so incredible. So she wrote, I quit my full-time job as a tenured professor and moved to Spain in 2021 after I proved to myself that I could match my academic salary with my side hustle as a freelance writer. I've written 4 books and hundreds of articles over the years, but always as a side gig. Once I had kids, I thought it would be impossible to live the life of a full-time writer. But I used all the lessons I learned from your podcast to make a plan and work the plan. I paid off more than $50K in consumer debt and stashed $50K in savings, and we moved to Spain in the middle of the pandemic, and I haven't looked back since. And pay attention to this part. She says, the secret to my side hustle success is that I discovered ghostwriting books for celebrity personalities. The book that changed everything for me sold for 7 figures. When I arrived in Spain, I had to design a writing business based on more than ghostwriting. And so I launched a podcast using my Moguls training that is pretty much a sales funnel to attract creative writing students and coaching clients. I am seriously following the Nicaila Matthews Okome methodology, and I'm continuing to see results and growth in my business. And then she says, later this year, I'll be hosting my first writing retreat in the south of Spain. First of all, what a beautiful life. Second of all, how amazing is that? You can, like I said, you can use podcasting to go in any lane you want. With the training you receive, you can use it to build up your own type of business, which is what Lori has done. So if being able to use Podcast Moguls to make supplementary income, quit your job, whatever your dream is, would be worth it to you, then it's definitely worth it to make that investment in yourself tonight. Another would it be worth it question you can ask is, would it be worth it to you if Podcast Moguls helps you land major sponsors. Perhaps you already have a show, but you're not seeing those sponsorship dollars and you really need some coaching on how to make yourself attractive and a good candidate for sponsorships. So if getting approached with sponsorship opportunities would make it worth it for you, then yes, come on down. This is what happened to Tolu of the UI Narrative podcast. So Tolu started a podcast all about user interface design and people of color working in user interface design. And guess who came knocking on her door? She didn't even actually have to pitch them. They came knocking on her door. The big G, Google. Okay. And she started this podcast from scratch, 0 downloads, 0 concept, nothing. And came through the program, came up with her concept, came up with her logo, came up with everything, and lands this amazingly huge sponsor. So that is just the power of Podcast Moguls. So like I said earlier, I had to learn this lesson myself, that the only way to learn in life is through action. If when I came out of grad school, if I kept thinking and like just sitting on my ideas and saying, all right, one day when I figure it out, I'll act, I wouldn't be where I am today. I would have ended up not acting until like 2020 or something. And so I would still be in the process of growing my show. But instead, I took action right away. So by 2016, I was able to start a podcast. By end of 2016, I'm pitching sponsors. By end of 2017, I'm quitting and doing this full time, all because I kept taking those actions right away. So I want to give you guys a bonus if you take action right away, like I did, a pay in full bonus. So again, this is a pay in full bonus. If you pay in full for the program, the first 5 people to pay in full for Podcast Moguls tonight will receive a one-on-one strategy call with me. So this could be you getting a call from me, Nikayla, to go even more in depth about your show, your plans, your challenges, the questions that you have. This is not something I do often. I have not done this since 2019. So please grab this chance while you have this, because I do not do this all the time. All right. Y'all know I'm about to have a baby, so grab it while you can. The first 5 people to pay in full tonight will receive a one-on-one strategy call with me. So again, go ahead and join. The link is in the chat, sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. And I don't think I did everyone. So sorry. I'm just placing it again. So everyone, now you can see. And you have until next Friday to sign up, you guys, at this price. However, please understand that you need to, whatchamacallit, in order to grab the one-on-one, you need to pay in full tonight. All right, so moving on. Let's get into some more pay in full bonuses. So you have a pitch email. I'll be sending you my pitch email when you pay in full. That landed me my first $4,000 in sponsorship. You'll also receive my 5-day branding blitz, which are the exact steps I took leading up to launching my podcast that landed me in the top charts in marketing and business. And then you'll also receive my pitch email that landed me in new and noteworthy for Apple. So these, again, are pay in full bonuses for everyone who joins tonight and pays in full. I was just taking a peek at the questions, y'all. I'm getting excited for Q&A. All right. Oh, and finally, I forgot how many bonuses I have, y'all. Another pay in full bonus is my pitch email that landed me my first international speaking engagement in Barbados. So again, I sent a cold email. I did not know the conference organizer. I sent out this email and I was invited to speak, flown out to speak internationally, all expenses paid. So I got to speak and I got a vacation. So if that's something you're interested in, you absolutely should start if you are a podcaster, you absolutely should start building up your speaking engagements as well, because the amount of practice you get in speaking on your podcast, it helps you to grow so much as a speaker. And speaking, again, there's so many options to make money podcasting. I didn't include speaking, but that is another really lucrative path once you get good at it. Again, everything takes time, okay? Nothing's overnight money, but everything can be lucrative. So I just want to share a little bit from the mouth of Podcast Mogul students, the power of Podcast Moguls. This is Dr. Alicia Franklin of the Research Her podcast. She, inside of our private community, was gracious enough to share her growth chart to show the power of the Podcast Moguls program. She said, at that time, she had started her podcast in November. She had no clue what in the world she was doing nor how to market the episodes. She just thought the people were going to show up. She obsessed over the course and relaunched the podcast within a month of joining the program with so much more vision. So as you can see, she went from hundreds of downloads to thousands. And that is what's possible. It's really powerful when you start going to thousands of downloads, because as you'll see in Podcast Moguls, when I show you the sponsorship calculator, you want to be calculating using thousands and not hundreds, because that's how you can charge more money. And another power of Podcast Moguls testimonials. This is Nia Clark. Her podcast, Black Wall Street 1921, passed 100,000 downloads in just 4 months. So when Nia actually started the program, she came in with an entirely different podcast. And that's happened to a number of people within the program. They come in, they have clearer vision, and they refine and end up starting an entirely new podcast. So that's what she did. And the popularity of her podcast prompted BBC News to reach out to her, interview her, and produce a 4-minute short video with her narrating the story of the Tulsa Race Massacre. How amazing is that? So again, the power of what is taught inside of Podcast Moguls can take you so many places. And then finally, this is from Blunt Blowing Mama, one of my favorite podcast names of all time. She is actually in the Science of Pro guest chair. And this is Shanitria. She, unprompted, one of the times I shared that the webinar was happening, this masterclass was happening, she shared this testimonial in her IG stories. And she said, Salsa Pro is an amazing podcast coach. As someone who is one of her Podcast Mogul students, I can truly say she helped me get Blunt Blowing Mama podcast off the ground, grow BBM's IG page. I only had 3K followers when I started her program, and through her techniques, I've grown organically to over 21,000 engaged followers. Because of Podcast Moguls, I was able to find my tribe. And she even gave me helpful advice when I started BBM clothing line too. So she does merch. So Shanisha says she really knows her stuff. And if you want to really build a successful podcast, then her Podcast Moguls program is worth the investment. So again, you are welcome, and you are invited to join Podcast Moguls today. And the pay in full bonus, the main one that you need to pay attention to is the opportunity for the strategy call, because that is really the first 5 people to pay tonight. The other bonuses, whenever you pay in full, you will receive those, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and just remind you guys, you have 2 options. Option 1, oh, and let me know when you join, by the way, so I can shout you out. So option 1 is a full payment of $9.97. Option 2, 4 monthly payments of $2.97. And this price does go away on Friday, June 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And then remember, when you pay in full, you do receive the pay in full bonuses, all right? Just a reminder of everything you're getting: monthly live coaching sessions, annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters and my media kit, my guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan, all available inside of Podcast Moguls. So thanks for staying until the end, y'all. Let's get into Q&A. Another bonus: everyone who stayed tonight, go ahead and use code HustlePro to get the rest of this month and all of next month free on Libsyn.com. If you host your podcast there, or if you move your podcast over to Libsyn, that code will get you the rest of this month and all of next month free, all right? So now let's get into Q&A. And this is just a reminder of everything you're getting. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute, just to have a fuller view of the chat. All right, y'all, let's get into it. Let's get into Q&A. Okay. So first things first, let's go back up. Usually with Q&A, I've answered some of these as we've gone through the presentation. So, but let me just, I'll go through each question. So kicking off with Latissa. How important is marketing and promoting your podcast? Did you work with brand managers? So like I said before, marketing and promoting your podcast is everything. If you build it, some people have the if I build it, they will come approach to things, and that's just not how it works. There are just too many podcasts, there are too many movies, TV shows, YouTube people for anybody to just think they can put out content and it will just do well. So it will involve you promoting your show each and every time you release an episode and in between releases. And no, I didn't work with brand managers. I follow the steps that I teach inside of Podcast Moguls, which includes how you approach launching your show, the different social media real estate that you need to get, how you approach promoting it each time you drop an episode, what you can do in between. And by the way, I'm getting ready to update the course with insights on what I'm doing and I'm going to be doing on TikTok, what I'm going to be doing to grow my email list even more this second half of the year. So as I learn things, I share with you guys because I truly want it to be a mentorship program where I am sharing with you, how I was able to achieve the things that I've achieved. Rose wants to know, what are the metrics sponsors want or need to know? What did your first sponsor ask you about your metrics? So sponsors, first of all, want to know the metrics on your audience, their age, their careers, all those demographics, all those, analytic information. But then also, of course, they want to know more about your downloads. They want to know your average monthly downloads. And that's why it's so important to grow your audience, because the faster and larger you can grow your audience, the more you can charge. And of course, the more worthwhile it is for sponsors. But you can make money at any size. You can also be your own sponsor for your show when you create a product, a paid ebook or guide or course or something, service, and promote it to your audience. So don't be discouraged as you're growing your show. Think about other ways you can monetize when you're still working to get and make headway with brand sponsors. Sharice wants to know, how would you connect your niche with your audience? So you should really think about it as the two go hand in hand. So as you're thinking about your show, the show that you're developing is not about you. It's not about what you want. It's about what someone else needs. Your show is a solution. So oftentimes podcasters, they're starting shows because they're like, oh, I want to talk about this, or I want to talk about that. And it's very I. Some people come in and they're like, oh, I want to do a podcast about my business because I want to get more clients for my business. So therefore, they try to make the podcast the same name as the business. And it's just a hot mess. Why? Because people don't listen to podcasts to make you money. People don't listen to podcasts because they want your business to grow. They listen to podcasts because it has some information that they want, whether they want to be entertained, whether they want to laugh, whether they want to hear a mystery, whether they want to hear business news and knowledge and learn. So the audience is the starting point of everything. And as you start with that, you niche down on what area of this topic do I want to focus on? Because I can't cover everything. I can't cover everything. Me, Nikayla, I can't cover everything in business and entrepreneurship. It's just too vast of a topic. But I can focus on side hustling, particularly the path from side hustle to entrepreneurship. So I hope that makes sense to you. And if you have any further questions, feel free to, put them in the chat. But yeah, the two go hand in hand. LaShawn says, why do you consider this is a hustle and not a career masterclass? So traditionally, when people think of careers, they think of working for someone else, applying on a job site, going in and doing a 9-to-5. So what I'm talking about is a hustle, because you can use this to do whatever you want to do. Maybe you don't want it to be your full-time career. However, you want to be flown out to speak internationally. You want that to be your side hustle where you're making this money that you can use for paying off a loan, investing in something, paying for childcare, whatever it is. So that's why I consider this a masterclass about hustles and not careers, because I'm not telling everyone you need to be a full-time podcaster, but I want you to know about the power of podcasting and how you can use it to pivot in so many ways. Kimberly says, email has info about products or episode topics. Kimberly, I'm not sure what your question is here. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your question is. Can you provide some more clarity there? All right. Tonya says, how do you market to sponsors when you have a niche audience which may not give you the quantity of downloads or subscribers that people would consider successful? So it's interesting that you are using niche in a way that seems like a hindrance, when that's not what niche means. So sometimes people over niche, sometimes people overly narrow down their audience, and they realize they need to branch out. So I was just talking to one of my Podcast Moguls alums on a recent episode of Side Hustle Pro. She was actually in the guest chair. Her name is Nasima. She has the Nurses on Fire podcast, and she talks to nurses who follow the FIRE movement. It's a financial movement. And at first she was only talking to, I think, nurses of color. And then she realized, okay, that's kind of overly niching. Like it can be, talking to nurses alone is already a niche. Like she didn't also have to narrow it down by race, okay, or even gender. So sometimes when you say that leads me to believe I need to know exactly what your topic is and why you think it's too narrow, because there's a sponsor for everything. I have students who talk about specific medical conditions. There are podcasts that talk about very, very specific medical conditions and do very, very well because there's a need for it. There's an audience for it. And no one else was covering this. And people who have this condition need to know about it. So let me know a little bit more about what your topic is and why you think you can't get sponsors. Joy says, once I collect email lists, how often should we communicate with them? This is really going to be up to you, Joy. I like to touch base with my audience at least once a week, but this is going to be based on you and your bandwidth and your audience. One thing I will say is do not be afraid to email your audience, you guys. So many people get an email list and they're like, oh my God, I emailed and I got some unsubscribes. I'm not going to email too much. Get the unsubscribes. When you start an email list, after a certain point, you are paying for people. And if they don't want to be on your email list, let them leave and let new people who want to be there come in. Okay? Do not worry about unsubscribes. Keep communicating with your list, and that allows you to refine your list, because that means the people who stay want to be there, want to hear from you. And when you're ready to communicate a message, they want to hear that message. All right. So Kimberly, again, let me make sure I understand this. You said every podcast should have a matching website with email subscription. Guess I was so basic, never thought of this. Oh, okay. So what you're asking is, should every podcast have a matching website with email subscription? When you start your podcast, you should think of it as a business, if you're ready to go from hobby to hustle. So a business needs a business website, and it needs a way for people to contact you. So yes, yes, you do need that. You do need to think of this as its own business. Tamika says, do you need LLC or nonprofit to get sponsors for podcasts? No, you don't need that. But personally, once I started, once I knew I was going to be earning money and I wanted to separate business and personal, I did establish a business entity. So that is not a requirement for you to get sponsorship. Like, sponsors won't say, oh, do you have a business entity? Oh, we can't give you money. However, you personally, if you're treating your podcast like a business, once you're ready to start earning money from your podcast, it would be in your good interest to think of establishing a business entity. All right. And you also say, or will companies just sponsor that align? Yes, companies sponsor based on the the alignments, and they do not then require you to have certain things in place in your business. But you, again, because you're treating this like a professional business, should want to have your ducks in a row. And then you said you had a media kit. How long was the process to your first about 4,000 from your first sponsor? So once I started pitching, I created a media kit. And funny fact, I actually bought a template for my first media kit off of Etsy. Again, it's super ugly. When you guys see it inside of Podcast Moguls, you're gonna laugh. And then my current media kit is actually from Google Slides, and I'm not ashamed. Like, it does what it needs to do. Most sponsors these days aren't even looking at a media kit, but once you, when you're first starting out and pitching, you need that. You need that, and you never know who will want it, so you always want to be able to quickly hand it out. But it's not like, it needs to be like something that you pay a ton of money for. And then the process to my first 4,000, I went to that intensive in the summer. So it was either June, July, or August. And so I started pitching the end of that year, and got a hit traction around the November, December timeframe, maybe even October. And then once everything was squared away, because it's a lot of back and forth when you start out cold pitching, especially when you start with a general inbox like I did. I just emailed like admin at. So by the time the contract was firmed up, that was January. Kimberly says, if your schedule doesn't allow you to be on live monthly sessions, are they available for replay? Yes, you're able to submit questions in advance and watch the replay afterwards, and all the replays are available within the course portal, which is hosted on Teachable. Latessa says, when creating an email list, what would you put in the email to grab their attention? So Latessa, you're going to be writing emails to your audience all the time. Like, so it's not like a one-off thing where I can say, hey, write this and you'll get their attention. Your email list and the way that you start your email list begins with what your show is about, what you're teaching, and how else you can serve your audience outside of the podcast. So with Side Hustle Pro, the lead magnets and freebies that I have used to grow my email list have all been about, hey, here, grab my my strategy on how I grew my Instagram, or like I said, I did a challenge. Let's meet for 5 days and let's go over the Instagram growth challenge. Let's do it together. Another thing, now I have a side hustle guide, so how to get your side hustle up and running in in a few days. So these are the things that you use, and then you've created a list with people who are eager to learn about side hustling and entrepreneurship, or just what they want to know more about, what I'm reading, what my business tips are. So I, when bandwidth allows, will send a newsletter just sharing some of my top reads and my tips from that week. Andrea Markham says, how long do we have access to this price? So this price is available until next Friday, June 9th. At 12 p.m. Eastern. Cherie says, is the option of 4 monthly payments of $297 for a limited time only? Yes. Tanisha says, is it looked upon badly to use a podcast recording sites like Anchor? I think it is now Spotify for podcasters. Yes, Anchor is going through a lot of shifts and changes. And to be honest, it's kind of looked at as a starter platform, but it's not bad. It's one of those things where I do suggest switching once you're more comfortable. But if it's going to help you get started right away, then use what's going to help you get started and not overthink the process. Kimberly says, in Moguls, do you share preferred podcast platforms for beginners, then scaling for monetization? Yes, I share that, but I also, inside of our live coaching calls, I answer all of your questions. So as new questions arise, like, hey, Nikayla, I just heard about this. What do you think of this? We discuss it as a group all the time. Rodney Washington says, another person who's telling me my podcast is very niche. You guys, you have to start telling me what your podcast topic is, because I just don't believe that it's this niche that it can't get stuff. So, all right, my podcast is very niche and I have a good idea of potential sponsors, but I have a young show, a little over 1,000 downloads. How many downloads should I have before I can pitch? the question you should be asking is, who is my audience? What do they need? And who can I pitch that aligns with that, Rodney? And again, tell me what's so niched about your show. C says, I lost connection for a bit. Will this be a replay? Missed how to grow audience? Yes, C, there is a replay coming out. Is there a best practice to decide on a name for a podcast? I do provide a refine your topic module, but naming your podcast really comes down to understanding that you need to help people know what your show is about in the title. You don't have to be literal. So in the Refine Your Podcast lesson, I talk about 3 different ways you can do this. It doesn't have to be so literal as here's a podcast about nurses who do this, but it shouldn't be so broad. It shouldn't be a play on words. It shouldn't be something that you say, my podcast is titled this, it's about. If you have to say it's about and explain to people because they just give you a blank stare, they don't have any idea what it could be about when you first say the name, then the name is not effective. Kimberly says, I was trying to ask why you would want people to sign up for our emails if we're not selling anything right away. What info are we supposed to share in emails? Okay, so yeah, emails, it's not a transactional thing. So you should think about building your email community in the same way you do your social media community. You want to be able to be connected to these people outside of a platform that could disappear at any moment. And at the very minimum, you should be sending out an email when you drop a podcast episode to let people know that that episode is out. And if you haven't yet launched your show, or you're taking a hiatus, like these are things you can communicate. And then once you're ready to launch your show, you can do a countdown, letting people know it's coming. It's just so powerful to be able to communicate what you have going on. And an email list and using a lead magnet to build the email list, make sure that the people on your list are people who elected to be there. Tonya Rivers says, my podcast is Mothers in Construction. It's a very small group comparatively. There aren't many women in construction, let alone mothers. I started the podcast because of this. I view it as a niche group. So my homework for you is to do some homework on where else you find women in construction across the internet. So search that hashtag on Instagram, not just mothers in construction, but women in construction, female construction workers, all these different words. Search on Facebook for Facebook groups. And I'd be curious to know if the community is bigger than you think. And from there, I would love to know, really define what it is that you're trying to accomplish through having a show about that. So I can't say yes or no if that's overly niching or not. The mother part might be, like you said, but I have a suspicion it's at least a little bigger than you might think. Rodney says, what's your thoughts about having a private podcast? That's not what Podcast Mode is about. We don't do private podcasts. There's you have to tell me why you want to do a private podcast, but that seems like something you do for your family and the homies. But this course and this program tonight, this training tonight, is all about how to go from hobby to hustle. And you can't really go from hobby to hustle with a private podcast that nobody could find if they search for it. Emmy Veneer says, what are the best platforms for a podcast? So Emmy, are you talking about hosting? If you're talking about hosting, I really recommend Libsyn. It's what I've been using for the last 7 years. And again, you can get the first month and a half free to test yourself using code HustlePro. Sometimes people ask me this and they're really asking about like the actual podcast publishing platforms like Apple and Spotify, and you get onto those through your host. So the host hosts your actual podcast files, and then it sends them out every time you drop an episode through what's called an RSS feed to your Apples, your Spotify, all the different podcast players out there. And so let me know which one you mean. Rodney says, my podcast is called The Coloring Book Creator. I help my audience find an idea for a coloring book and help them market and publish it in 30 days. That's awesome, Rodney. My husband and I actually have a coloring book app called Color Noir. And we, especially him, have done so much research on the coloring book industry, and that is a huge industry. So it's niche, but not overly niche. And you know, you could be doing a lot with app creators and sponsorships there. So that's a very exciting place to be, especially the launching and marketing it in 30 days. That lends itself to a lot of lead magnet ideas. For sure, you could even do a quick summary of one of your episodes as a quick ebook or e-guide that you distribute as a lead magnet on, and having the link to all of your social media bios. Opportunities are endless. I'm really excited about that. So kudos to you. Rose says, why Libsyn versus some of the others out there? So Libsyn is one of the oldest and most established hosts. When I was starting out in 2016, there were fewer hosts and not all of them were recognized by Apple Podcasts. So I wanted to be on a platform that is recognized and whose stats I could trust, because I knew that I would want to monetize at some point, and I needed to be able to send those stats to sponsors and, you know, be able to trust that I was seeing as much information and the total information about my downloads. So I also like their customer service. So if you ever have any issues or trouble with anything, they're very responsive. Emmy says, where's the best place to host a podcast, the best place for a podcast to be heard, and the best place to do a podcast live like Twitch, etc. So the best place to host a podcast is very subjective. That's going to be up to you and your, your user interface preference. That's like saying, what's the best place to have an email address, right? Some people like Yahoo, some people like Gmail, some people like, you know, whatever else they use. So like I said, I prefer Libsyn. Go search Apple approved publishers, approved hosts, and you can get a list from Apple's website of all the other hosts that they approve, things like, you know, Podbean and Blueberry and things like that. And you can get a sample and, you know, check out the user interfaces, see which one you like. The best place for a podcast to be heard. Well, Apple is the #1 podcast publisher. Not publisher, but most downloads from podcasters are coming from Apple, unless you're not on Apple. It's not YouTube, although they're trying to really make a big play in podcasting, and it's not Spotify. So it is Apple, but you should be on all of the platforms where a podcast can be heard. There's no like, oh, this is the best, so only be on that. You're limiting yourself. So make sure your show, once you select a host, make sure you send your RSS feed to all of the different places where people can hear podcasts. And then finally, last question is from, or comment. Oh, that's my Apple Watch. The last comment is from Rodney. Thanks so much for the great advice. Now that you know the subject and audience, should I wait and get some downloads before approaching potential sponsors? You can be doing both. So don't approach your top sponsors. Start with start with some practice, and then continue to grow your show while you're doing that. You might even work with some smaller coloring book creators if they want to be on the show, get some visibility and things like that. And you can do some affiliate type of sponsorships just so you get your feet wet and get some more experience. And then you're able to go to the bigger sponsors and say, I've worked with such and such and such. And then also have time to build up your download numbers. So always, you're always doing both. I was pitching sponsors when I had way less downloads, and I'm pitching sponsors now with more downloads. So I never stop pitching. And with that, you guys, we are going to conclude tonight's masterclass.